Anyways, yeah, it's been amazing. A couple of busy. It's been a busy week. Are we recording? Oh, I thought you stopped it for some reason.
This is my track. This is the Nostaljunk Podcast, where one person's junk is another person's childhood. I'm Matt McGrath.
And I'm Kyle Smith. Join us as we take a deep dive into your pop culture consciousness. We're back.
Heyo!
Heyo!
Is this our intro now?
I hope not. But yeah, really awesome first couple episodes. A lot of great responses. A lot of people shooting us messages, connecting. You even sent me a message. I forget his name now. He sent us a list of this huge list of nostalgic TV shows.
This is Thomas Meehan. So TV, his number one show is Doctor Who.
Wow. Yeah. See that? I mean, that's one show I just never really. Not the original, not the remake, just never really got into. But I mean, obviously, it's amazing that they have such a dedicated fan. And
yeah, no, and I'm the same. I have never watched any Doctor Who. I probably am missing out.
You were into sci-fi normally?
Really not.
Yeah, neither am I. Really, I know you said. You talked about 2001 on our movies episode, but yeah, same with me. I'm not. Aside from I guess Star Wars, maybe some Star Trek. I love the reboot to Star Trek, but. I was never really into that as a kid. Same with like Doctor Who or anything mostly.
Before 2001, my sci-fi was the Alien franchise. But that's because it's rooted in horror more than it is sci-fi.
But he does have a show that he mentions other than Doctor Who that I was actually a really big fan of as a kid.
Huge.
Same with you?
Huge.
If you know what I'm talking about. And that's Power Rangers.
Go Power Rangers!
I loved Power Rangers as a kid.
Oh, dude.
It's been so long since I've watched it, but yeah, no, I was definitely tuning in every week. I love that show. What's the villain's? I forget the evil queen's name or whoever she was.
Rita.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not as cool as how evil she was, but it was Rita.
And what was the pink Power Ranger's name?
Kimberly.
Yeah, I had a big crush on her.
Of course.
Of course.
You mean Flashpoint?
What? Is she on Flashpoint?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Never watched that show.
His number one movie of all time is the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie.
That's with that original cast, right? They made that.
Yeah. So then his number two movie was Doctor Who, the movie, Pokemon, the first movie, Mewtwo Strikes Back. Number 4 was Spirited Away, and High School Musical, number 5. Power Rangers, this is another cool thing. It's kind of like a really good band that somehow reinvents themselves, for better or for worse, every so many years so that they're new for a new generation. One band that I think of whenever I think of that is Green Day. Like, they've transformed themselves just enough over the years that they will keep the diehard fans for hearing the hits, but those diehard fans aren't too alienated by introducing maybe their own children to Green Day, being like, Green Day's still pretty important to a certain age group in every generation.
Yeah, for sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. So yeah, anyways, thanks for reaching out, Thomas. That's amazing. I'll have to definitely try to check some of that. I think the only movie on that list that I've probably seen is Spirited Away, but that's an amazing movie. So
right.
Another shout out got to give. I know a podcast that I'm definitely a big fan of. I know Matt has now become a big fan of. Is the Shockwaves podcast. It's pretty much my favorite movie podcast, and I've been listening to it for. I think definitely over a year. They used to be called Killer POV. There's 4 of them now. There used to be 3 of them, and they just talk all things horror. And now they were picked up by Fangoria and Blumhouse Productions, like a co-production podcast now. And they're just amazing. They have a great rapport, all 4 of the hosts, but in particular, Rebekah McKendry, one of the hosts of Shockwave.
She actually Dr.
Exactly.
McKendry.
I was just going to say she actually has a PhD in horror studies. So I mean, that's the coolest doctor I think I've ever heard of. I have my list in front of me, but I am going to just change it right on the fly right now because when I was looking at it, I was like, there was one show. I'll give a special shout out to it right now, but it was The Sopranos. I was going to put The Sopranos on there. I love The Sopranos.
Great show.
It's like instantly compelling television. It's just amazing. But in terms of something that maybe just means more to me, there was other shows maybe that could have made this list, like Parks and Rec, like The Office. But I read this awesome Vice article that really put this show on a new level for me, and it kind of described how the whole confessional documentary style TV that The Office obviously exploded with and Parks and Rec. But there was one local show to us Nova Scotians. When I looked it up on Wikipedia, the first episode did premiere, I think 3 or 4 months before the British premiere of The Office. And that show is Trailer Park Boys. I'm going to give Trailer Park Boys its due. I love the show. You know, maybe I kind of fell off. They've been going on a long time now. I haven't kept up with it as much as I would like. But when just you're talking about characters, you're talking about a Simpsons type town populated with so many memorable characters that just get up to so much shenanigans. And maybe because also it takes place in Nova Scotia, where we're both from. Specifically, I remember coming up next, a new showcase original, Trailer Park Boys. And I had not heard anything. No commercials, no nothing. I was completely by myself on it, like literally zero outside kind of reference. And it started up and it was like just cheap and documentary style. And it said, I forget the correctional center that the season 1 starts on, and it says Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. I was like, what? Because I grew up in Cole Harbour, which is pretty much Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. And just from the moment Rob Wells as Ricky opened his mouth, I think as soon as he said, getting out of jail today, thank fuck. Like the way he said it, I was like, I'm in. Because just the style, I don't know, it was just instantly hilarious to me. Ricky's one of my favorite television characters of all time. Of course, Bubbles, Julian, Leahy, the late great John Dunsworth. Come on now, Leahy, amazing. So many great characters, so many great stories, moments. Cyrus, that dick. You know, come on, man. That show's amazing. So I'm going to bump this. Can you believe I'm bumping The Sopranos for Trailer Park? I can believe it.
I can believe it.
Trailer Park Boys.
Yeah. Interesting tie-in with the Trailer Park Boys.
Full disclosure,
my father-in-law is
the Sam Squanch?
Sam Lasco. It is a culture unto itself that exists and is appreciated solely by us Nova Scotians. Yes, it can be enjoyed by many others, but my God, when you watch the Trailer Park Boys, you either know or are related to people indirectly, very similar, share the same accents.
Yes.
Maybe not the same situations, not the same crimes, not the same anything. It's just the thank fuck moments that you talk about that really gives you a sense of where it's from.
They're proud about where they're from and keep making that a part of the show too, which maybe makes it a little special to us Nova Scotians. But just watching it, you can spot the locations that they film at, and they make reference to real places, and they use local news personalities. I think Kayla Hounsell was on an episode at one point. Like, I don't know. It's very special to us Nova Scotians, I think.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah. My number 5 entry does feel like a little soon, but then I think about what year it is and I'm realizing I'm aging and I'm forgetting how old I am. Number 5 is The Wire.
Ooh, The Wire.
The Wire does rank very highly for a lot of people. Again, not influencing my decision, but you can see how gritty television reinvents itself every so often. And gritty can actually be accessible. And this is a product of reaching masses with great storytelling through a really dark lens. Mm-hmm. And really, that's all I can say about The Wire. To sum it up, it's a really, really great story of a dark place. The location and city itself is a character.
Yeah, that's Milwaukee, right?
Milwaukee.
Oh, Milwaukee.
Which is Algonquin for the good land. Does this guy know how to party or what?
Huh?
Okay. So anyway, The Wire.
Yeah, The Wire. I mean, I've only watched a couple episodes. Yeah, one of those shows I just never got around to. All right, moving on. My number 4, and this now I'm going back and forth, obviously, with what the ranking should be, but I'm just going to talk about this one next. In this age of true crime is so huge now, right? Like we have the true crime podcasts have exploded. Everyone's obsessed with it. This show kind of, for me, was the beginning of all that. The storytelling, the crimes, ghost stories, even. But my number 4 is Unsolved Mysteries, as just one of my favorite shows ever. The scariest intro music probably of all time. If I put that on and I start to play that for my wife, she freaks out and she tells me to stop playing it because it's too scary. It's just so scary. And then you got Robert Stack coming out from the fog in an alleyway with his big ass trench coat. He's about to tell you some really dark shit.
Right.
But man, I just love something about Unsolved Mysteries. I tuned in for it every week. I loved it. I was obsessed with it. The stories, I remember the pictures of the people or the suspects or the missing people always seemed a little extra scary. I don't know, the way they'd zoom in on them. The ghost stories especially I loved. Just a huge ghost story fan, and stories about the Queen Mary. I think one of my nightmares that I remember I always remember this one nightmare, and I think it was from Unsolved Mysteries, where the radio dial turns by itself. A ghost is turning this radio dial, and the little markers going back and forth. For some reason, that gave me nightmares. So, but yeah, I love that show. That's my number 4, Unsolved Mysteries.
Haven't watched it since it's been on, and the only thing I remember is how horrifying the intro was.
Yeah. Dun, 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 dun.
Stop
dun,
it.
Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah. Robert Stack is Alex Trebek of true crime.
One's the normal world and one's the upside down.
Yeah, that's right. Well said, sir. My number 4, Trailer Park Boys.
Hey, I was hoping it was going to be on your list.
Yeah, it is. And again, much like yourself, I've fallen off of the wagon. Season 1, 2, 3, 4. Dude, Trailer Park Boys, first 4 seasons, so good.
Such like tiny attention, like such an attention to detail in what makes those characters funny. Little subtle things, like Ricky passed out on the road, and when he like raises his head, he has a little pebble stuck to his forehead or something, and it falls off and he's getting up. I don't know.
Dude, one of my favorite moments, and to recreate it is to do it in injustice. I hope I can find the clip and I will share it. But it is when the brakes are cut from Ricky's car and he's cruising in the distance, and it's behind the camera, and Bubbles looks beyond the camera to see Ricky in the distance, and he can't stop. He goes through Leahy's trailer.
Mm-hmm.
Bubbles, without the camera cutting, goes, Jesus, Ricky moving at a good fucking clip.
The language, yeah.
It's just so good. Like, it's that comedic timing that it only exists with genius.
I could talk about Rob Wells as Ricky all day, but really, in terms of a character, a single character, he's the Canadian Homer Simpson or something. Like, he's that good of a character. The Rickyisms, when he says stuff like worst case Ontario, or he says...
It doesn't take rocket appliance to figure that out.
It comes out of his mouth so quickly and so effortlessly. And if you listen to their podcast, so much of that show is based on improv, it seems. And Rob Wells can just like spout these Rickyisms off like it's nothing. It's insane. I love Ricky so much.
Yeah. I mean, yes.
What more can you say?
What more can we say? Probably a whole episode.
Yeah, that's true. We should do a whole episode.
We should really do a retrospective on the first 3 seasons.
Oh man! And now you got me all talking about Trailer Park Boys.
Now I'm jazzed about it.
Well, now I got to give a shout out to, and I miss him so much on the show, but Jonathan Torrance as J-Rock.
Good Lord, yes.
So funny. So many amazing moments as J-Rock.
Yeah.
I mean, you could just talk about him forever. Anyways. All right. So my number 3, moving on to number 3, Trailer Park Boys being a great ensemble. Here's another great ensemble, although there was only 5 of them. And I know it probably took things like Monty Python to get here, but something uniquely Canadian, a great sketch show. My number 3, Kids in the Hall. Talk about nostalgia, being a teenager in Canada. Just CBC, just just a great, I don't know, it made you feel appreciative to be, I guess, Canadian, to be able to watch a show like Kids in the Hall. It was just so surreal, just great characters, great recurring characters like Chicken Lady and Cabbage Head and Mr. Heavyfoot and just a perfect comedic cast. Obviously Dave Foley, Bruce McCullough, the guy with my pen. Remember that sketch?
Yes.
But yeah, again, appointment television. I would show up every week to watch that show. I loved it. And actually, I remember the finale happening so abruptly. And I almost, maybe, I don't know, I wasn't keeping up with the news or whatever, but I was calling up all my friends. I was like, are we seeing what I think we're seeing? Because they were burying, remember the end, it ended with them burying all 5 of them. And even, or what's his name? Paul Bellini?
Mm-hmm.
He was burying them. And I was like, are they burying, is this show ending? It was such a blow, but I love that show. You can rewatch it now on CBC Gem, their streaming service. And it's been great going back and seeing all those great episodes.
That's awesome. Kids in the Hall Brain Candy. I remember watching that more than the show.
Okay.
And I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why I never went, but you know what?
Yeah.
I'm going to go watch it now.
You should. Yeah, it's amazing. Actually, it's funny, the Brain Candy, I remember the Roger, just what makes me love Roger Ebert so much is I remember watching Siskel and Ebert that week that it came out, and Siskel started it off and he hated it. He went on and on and on and on about how Brain Candy was dumb and how he hated every second of it. And then it switches to Roger, and I love him for this. He goes, boy, were we off on this one. And he loved Brain Candy and he gave it thumbs up.
Yeah.
And this, it's like a precursor to surreal humor, like Tim and Eric, awesome show, great job. Just kind of weird, just going for, maybe trying not to make sense, just, it's funny or not to make any sense. Like Chicken Lady, like what is, she's a freak show chicken.
Yeah, right.
It's just weird, but
it's like when Saturday Night Live lets go of a really good writer because they come up with these kind of ideas. They're like, this will never make it. That's Kids in the Hall. It's all probably the good sketches that were never aired for Saturday Night Live. That's how I feel about it. Like really, really good sketches, really hilarious, out there, zany, niche market. Very cool choice.
I'm killing it, Matt.
You are fucking great. All right, so I was really torn with whether or not this is a kid's show or not. But if we're talking about nostalgia, another Canadian classic, and I mean a classic, you'd see some old shows air at different times. And this is not of my generation. I had to look it up. Anyway, it's from the 70s. Hilarious House of Fright and Steam.
Oh, you're going there? Okay.
So, again,
I love that show.
I don't really consider it a kids show to me.
Okay, I got you.
Because it's not my top kids show.
Yep.
But it really goes back to like, man, TV was so cool back then.
Man, I can't believe, that's amazing you mentioned that show. That's one of my favorite shows of all time.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's a great series. If you're not acquainted with it, I'm sorry, but you're missing out because Vincent Price is in it.
Yes, and he does the intro for it. That great Vincent. When that show started, I loved it. I just get right ready for it because his voice and the thunder and lightning and all that, and he's like, you knew it was going to start. And now, fun fact about that, I did read recently that Vincent Price, I think he just didn't want to be like super pigeonholed into all the horror, August and stuff. He wanted to do a kids show. So it was quite a get for them at the time because it was like, I forget where in Ontario, it was just like a kind of, a local cable network in Ontario that managed to get Vincent Price. And he showed up and he did all of his, I think 300 different monologues or the 300 different poems. Was it over a day? I forget.
I think it was like a one session kind of day.
And they paid him like $30,000, $40,000 to do it, I think, for something, but amazing.
That's so good.
Igor, the Count. Was he called Dracula or was he just called the Count?
The Count.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was Billy Van that was the actor.
Yes, and he played pretty much, he was like the Hank Azaria of the Hilarious House of Frightenstein. He played so many characters. Griselda, the cook.
My favorite.
Yeah.
Seriously, my favorite.
I think between her and the librarian,
But it was Griselda the witch, but she thought she was a cook.
Oh yeah, and she would put all this like really nasty shit into like a big pot, and she thought it was gonna be good, and then every time she would taste it at the end, and no, it was disgusting.
Yeah, I think it pretty well killed her every episode.
Oh yeah, and I did love the running gag with the librarian. He was just like this old guy in a creepy library, and he would try to scare you. Because it was a kids show again, remember, and he would want to scare the kids with like a tale of terror, and every time it would just be some like ancient, I don't know, some text that was just boring.
And it was so boring, and he'd fall asleep.
He's like, well, maybe next time.
Yeah.
Another lovely day begins. Ghosts and ghouls with greenish skin. So close your eyes and you will find that you've arrived in Frightenstein. Perhaps the Count will find a way to make his monster work today. For if he solves this monster mania, he can return to Transylvania. So welcome where the sun won't shine, to the castle of Count Frightenstein.
My number two. Now, my number two and my number one are just interchangeable. I do give the edge to one. Obviously, I'm going to talk about in a second. So I'll just talk about my number two. The greatest show, one of the greatest animated show of all time, The Simpsons. It's got to be The Simpsons. I talked before about how Trailer Park Boys has a town populated with characters. I mean, Springfield is just such a just what a masterpiece of a creation of just a town of characters, recurring characters, voices, moments. Homer Simpson. I've watched The Simpsons, I guess now it's pretty much my whole life. You know, when you talk about nostalgia, even it's just Simpsons goes back as far as I can remember. It's been around as far as I can remember, and you know,
it's like a soap opera.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
it
really
doesn't end.
They even did that joke, like the cleaning of a house, it never ends. And that is The Simpsons. Yeah, I mean, who knows how long it'll keep going? Hopefully, you know, I think a lot of people talk about the quality kind of waning, but every time I watch a episode from even 5 years ago that I probably have only seen once at the time, the episode will start and I remember it. It's like the power of The Simpsons is just, I can, you know, you just remember it. Just so many memorable moments from that show.
Well, I can't say that I am not a fan of The Simpsons.
Mm-hmm.
When I was younger, definitely that was like, to my mom, that was a taboo show.
Yeah, same here. My grandmother did not want me and my brother, to be watching The Simpsons because of the power of the anti-Bart Simpson campaign. That remember
Right.
when you first came out, the I'm an underachiever and proud of it. That whole thing. That.
In our house, I watched it with Dad because Dad liked it. He thought Homer was the pinnacle of a fuck up. And we talked about with Clark Griswold.
Yeah,
He's lovable.
Yeah.
He's dumb.
he wants the best for his family.
He wants to do the best, but he's stupid.
He is, although he can be selfish at times. But yes, he does love his family.
Yes. And I think that's the end moral of the series is that, you know, as different as we are and as crazy as the episodes can get, it's still a family at the end of the day that it's focused around.
Yeah.
And you know, Dad always said, if you had a bad day, put on The Simpsons. Homer's having a worse day.
That's true.
That was his therapy. But when I think back, I think about my mom not approving us watching it. And when I say us, I mean me and my dad. So I think that I do have really fond memories of just watching a show in secret with my father.
Nice.
Really funny moment, right?
Yeah,
which is
awesome.
a very Simpson moment.
That's
really.
true. Yeah.
You know, you think about it. Anyway,
Nice.
that's cool. My number two, another little piece of Canadian history. It's the Tom Green Show.
Wow, man, I didn't even think of the Tom Green Show when I was doing up these lists. That's a good one.
And I was junior high, my really good friend that I grew up with, Jason, he was always just ahead of the curve with whatever was edgy. At the time, his sister's boyfriend was always into whatever was cool or edgy. So he'd recommend it to Jason. Jason would recommend it to me. So, Tom Green was such an innovator for shock that it became almost a farce of shock. So, like, some people, and I think of Jackass, I think of Viva La Bam, like the more overproduced era where, yes, it's funny, but you're like, okay, this was totally staged to the point where it was produced.
Yes.
And it's scripted. Tom Green really went into the shock, but almost made fun of the fact that he's being ridiculous. And that's the difference. It's like having fun with creating something new, despite what people think. So, and he was a proud Canadian throughout all of it, incorporated a lot of Canadian landmarks, situations, characters, all of that. And he was a one-person show.
Yeah.
He did all of the sketches, again, very loosely, but it was very animated. It was very in your face. It would elicit emotion as a fan. You were watching it, and then all of a sudden you're thinking, oh, that can't get any. Oh, it got worse.
Yeah.
I always think, and some of my favorite moments are the more genuine responses. So like him pranking his dad and his parents.
The Slutmobile.
Oh, dude.
I don't know what your problem is, Dad. It's just your Slutmobile. I don't know what you're so upset about.
Yeah. He pulls up to the bus shelter because his father refuses to get into the vehicle to drive it to work, obviously because
he's driving alongside of him and he's not even looking at Tom Green. He's just like walking to the bus stop, not even trying to pay attention.
Trench coat and a briefcase. And his dumbass son has hijacked the car and had two lesbians on the hood, and it says the Slutmobile.
The look on people's faces at the bus stop
when he pulls up.
Yeah.
Oh my God. But what I love about that sketch is Tom is overnight the dumpster next to the car waiting for his dad in the morning, and the soundbite that comes out of Tom's dad is Jesus Christ.
Such a dad. This is the dad reaction.
Oh my God. Those are the funniest moments of Tom Green for me. Right at that turning point for him when he went from Rogers Public Access, like the Wayne's World of Canada, essentially, and he goes into Comedy Network. He then got enough traction and attention that he went to MTV. There was a gray period right in between. He came to Halifax and he was on breakfast television. And Jason and I flipped our lids because our boy is literally a block away from us on the other side of Olin's Brewery where I was at.
Okay.
So we get on the phone with each other. We say, oh my God, we got to get down to breakfast television right now. Tom's on TV. He's already hijacked a camera from someone. He's running around the like right up close to it. It looks stupid. He's turning breakfast television into the Tom Green show. Anyway, they kick him out. Now, looking back, might have been staged, might not have been, because what he did was he spilled a cup of Tim Hortons coffee on himself.
Yeah.
And then said it was too hot. Well, they're the sponsor.
Yeah.
So he might have been kicked out for real.
Yeah, I wonder.
Anyway, so they made a part of it. There's Jason and I standing on the sidewalk as Tom gets booted out of the gate at breakfast television. He turns around so casually and goes, hey guys, and then goes back to his routine with them. And my mind just exploded. I went, oh my God, it's Tom Green. But it was not just Tom Green. It was Phil Giroux and Glenn.
That's amazing.
Yeah, he spent some time in Halifax, and we met him right when he was getting kicked out of the TV.
That's hilarious.
And that's a very firm imprint in my memory. So it's not so much about the episodes, not so much about the sketches. It's the impact the whole show had to Canadian youth.
For sure. Yeah. Also, now that I'm just thinking more about that show, it really was a precursor to that prank-based, reality-based kind of. Eric Andre owes his entire career to Tom Green. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. Obviously, Jackass and just kind of the surrealness of the spontaneity of his sketches were so memorable.
Lenny versus Spenny.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you like some Italian polenta? You remember that one? I mean, I could just start riffing off of just old, weird, random Tom Green moments.
Oh yeah. No, I remember that one. He made the cow brain boat.
Oh my, the cow brain boat. Wow. I remember the dead raccoon in the garbage bag.
Oh.
That he threw into the audience.
Oh my God.
Everyone started getting sick.
There was one where he was, and I think it's actually pretty genius, and it's really funny. It's gross, but if you can appreciate it, it's really funny.
Mm-hmm.
Some critic had said that the show is nothing but poo-poo humor. He literally poops in the toilet, picks it up, and he goes into the audience walking around. He's like, this is poo-poo humor. This is poo-poo humor. And someone touched it in the audience. Without missing a beat, Tom goes, "Oh, you thought it was a prop."
I do remember that.
And the guy's like, "Yeah, I did." And he's like looking for something to wipe the poop off his finger. Meanwhile, Tom goes back to his like Tonight Show style desk and puts it in a little doll's bed on the desk.
Oh my. All right, my number one show of all time.
Is it going to be a joint?
It was definitely.
It's a tie.
It's definitely.
Are
gonna
you
be a
and
joint.
I
I know
both?
enough about. I know enough about Matt to know that this is, and a couple other of my friends, that this is going to be probably a joint number one.
I am so glad that you love Will and Grace as much as I do.
Again, interchangeable with The Simpsons, but in terms of a perfect run of 9 seasons, characters, like the most rewatchable show of all time. I literally watch this show every day still on. I think they play it on FX. Anyways, the number one show of all time, the greatest show of all time, Seinfeld. Just a perfect television show that just. The story of it all, even like how Larry David and Seinfeld came up with it. Obviously the first season's not the greatest. Every show has the kind of growing pains. But man, did they find their stride really, really quickly in terms of what they wanted to do, in terms of their style, their language, their man, I don't know. So I could talk. It's just hard to talk about. There's so many great moments and great stories, and I just love that show so much.
Seinfeld is fantastic, and there's enough of a presence now online that will say that they don't like it or they never watched it.
Who says that?
People who I don't follow. Anyway, but no, Seinfeld I think is actually fairly rated, objectively speaking.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's properly charted as still being one of those greatest shows because it's aged well, despite it having its artifacts that put it back in like, that crossover of late 80s to early 90s.
Yeah.
The context and the content of every joke and every situation is still the same because it's always about being shitty people.
And also just Seinfeld as a comedian, his style of humor was always, it was always like, what's the deal with? Because his humor was based on just human nature and the funny parts about just being the things that we all kind of go through. That was kind of his style. And that's what Seinfeld's about. Seinfeld's about those ridiculous moments we find ourselves in day out at work, in relationships, with our friends, and it applies to everybody. I think.
Quirks of society.
Yes.
But I think the biggest takeaway from Seinfeld is honestly the cultural impact that it left in its wake. So like, even years and we're talking years now after it's ended, like it ended in 99.
Yeah.
So 98, 99?
I think so.
99.
Yeah.
So now it is 2020, like this is a good chunk of time since, and we still use quotes like canon in our regular dialect.
Yeah, it did change the language. Yeah,
it changed the language, but it also it acknowledges that fan or not, those terms came from something.
Yeah, exactly.
A close talker came from Seinfeld. Yada yada yada. The soup
Yada,
Nazi.
yada, yada. That's a big one.
You know, like these are all things that we say every day, and if it wasn't for Seinfeld, we might have figured out a way to say them now. I'm not going to say that we couldn't have made it without them, but it was lightning in a bottle.
And Seinfeld's also one of those shows where I go back and forth with my favorite. My favorite character changes all the time and still changes all the time, which I don't know. I find that kind of interesting. At first, George was just huge. I would just love George. So I still love George. I think George might be the best character on the show, but then there's a moment in time where I'll just love Kramer so much, and Kramer's so perfect. And even Elaine just her reactions, or I don't know. What's interesting about the show is that it changes even now with how I view it, how I view different characters, and where they fall on kind of like that spectrum, I guess.
It's how they navigate their way through situations. And I think that's where it changes for us as we get older, because as we get older, we get more and more cynical. We get more and more displeased with the minutia of the everyday life, which is Seinfeld.
We turn into more George than Kramer. Kramer just, like they said, Kramer lives in a fantasy world, and George is just, the weight of the world is just beating him down at all times.
That's me every day.
George or Kramer?
Yeah, George.
So that's my number one. What's your number one, Matt?
Seinfeld. So, yeah, I mean, at this point, it's just safe to say we are going to do some Seinfeld, more in depth. But this is just a loose discussion. We're just sharing. We want to give context for our listeners of where we're coming from. This is not about us saying, you've got to watch this, you got to listen to this. This is just us being us. But we are going to dig deep. And we are depending on you guys. And already the listeners have reached out. Everyone's sharing their 2 cents. And it's been a lot of fun so far, just connecting with other people over our similar tastes. Continue to reach out to us. You know how to get a hold of us. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Nostaljunk Pod. New episode drops every Tuesday, everywhere you listen to your podcasts. And don't be shy. Send us an email, nostaljunkpodcast@gmail.com. I'm Matt, saying, giddy up.
And I'm Kyle, saying, is that a Titleist?
The castle lights are growing dim. There's no one left but me and him. When next we meet in Frankenstone, don't come alone.